The manila envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb, its contents having detonated my world just hours earlier. 30 days to vacate the premises, the legal document stated in cold, clinical language. After 23 years of calling this house my home, my son David and his wife Miranda had decided I was no longer welcome. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same house where I had changed David's diapers, nursed him through chickenpox, and celebrated his high school graduation. Now, at 68 years old, I was being treated like an unwanted tenant. The transformation had been gradual at first. David's tech startup had grown from a garage operation to a multi-million-dollar company over the past 3 years. With success came changes: the expensive suits, the luxury car, and most notably, Miranda's increasing influence over his decisions. She had always been polite but distant, but lately, her suggestions about downsizing and lifestyle changes had become more frequent and pointed. The final straw came when she convinced David that having his elderly father living in the family home was cramping their style and preventing them from moving forward in their social circles. I remember the conversation vividly. David couldn't even look me in the eye as he delivered the news, his voice wavering slightly as he explained their generous offer to help me find a nice senior living facility. Miranda stood behind him, her arms crossed, wearing an expression of practiced sympathy that fooled no one. "It's really for the best, Dad," David had said, his words hollow and rehearsed. "You'll have people your own age to talk to, activities to keep you busy. We've already looked at some places. They're really nice." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. This wasn't just about losing my home. It was about losing my son to someone who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient relic of his past. As I sat in the kitchen that evening, surrounded by decades of memories, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't beg, wouldn't plead, and wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I would show them exactly what they were throwing away. Little did they know that the elderly father they were so eager to discard had been quietly building something of his own, something that would soon make David's success look like pocket change. The next 30 days wouldn't just be about finding a new place to live. They would be about reclaiming my dignity and showing my ungrateful son the true meaning of family. Moving through my belongings felt like archaeological work, each box revealing layers of a life my son had chosen to ignore. In the dusty corners of my home office, behind tax documents and family photos, lay the evidence of a journey David never knew I had taken. For the past 5 years, while he was building his tech empire, I had been quietly constructing my own financial fortress through careful investments, cryptocurrency trades, and a small but profitable consulting business for retired executives. The irony was delicious. While David saw me as a burden, I had accumulated assets worth considerably more than his startup's valuation. The cryptocurrency portfolio alone was worth $3.2 million. I had started investing in Bitcoin back in 2018, when David had laughed at my silly computer money experiments. While he was focused on impressing venture capitalists, I was learning about blockchain technology, studying market patterns, and making strategic investments with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. My consulting work with former Fortune 500 executives had also proven lucrative. Companies paid handsomely for my decades of experience in crisis management and organizational restructuring. But money was just one piece of the puzzle. The real treasure lay in my network of connections, relationships David had no idea existed. During my 40-year career in corporate strategy, I had built relationships with industry leaders, investors, and innovators across multiple sectors. These weren't just professional contacts. They were friends who respected my judgment and trusted my insights. While David struggled to secure his Series B funding, I had 3 different investment groups asking if I had any promising opportunities they should consider. The plan began to crystallize as I sorted through my documents. I wouldn't just survive this betrayal. I would thrive beyond anything David could imagine. The first step was establishing my new headquarters. Instead of the senior living facility Miranda had so thoughtfully researched, I would purchase a penthouse in the city's most prestigious district. The second step was more delicate. I would begin quietly investigating David's business, using my industry connections to gather intelligence about his company's actual financial health and market position. What I discovered was both satisfying and concerning. David's company, while successful on paper, was vulnerable in ways that would shock him. His rapid expansion had created operational inefficiencies, his customer retention rates were declining, and his main competitor was preparing to launch a product that would make David's technology obsolete within 2 years. Miranda's expensive lifestyle demands were also draining resources that should have been reinvested in research and development. They thought they were riding high, but I could see the storm clouds gathering. The question wasn't whether they would need help, it was whether I would be willing to provide it when the time came. The penthouse at Metropolitan Towers wasn't just a home, it was a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city, while smart home technology managed everything from lighting to climate control with voice commands. The contrast with my old living situation couldn't have been more dramatic. Where David and Miranda had seen an elderly man cluttering their space, I now lived in 3,000 square feet of luxury that most people could only dream of. The monthly rent alone exceeded David's previous annual salary, a fact that would have stunned him had he known. Setting up my new office was like assembling a war room. Multiple monitors displayed real-time market data, cryptocurrency portfolios, and business intelligence feeds. The mahogany desk, which had once belonged to a Fortune 500 CEO, now served as my command center for operations that spanned 3 continents. I had quietly established a holding company, Meridian Ventures, with subsidiaries focusing on technology investments, real estate development, and strategic consulting. Within weeks of moving in, I was already fielding calls from entrepreneurs seeking funding and established companies requesting advisory services. The transformation went beyond just financial success. At 68, I was in the best shape of my life, having hired a personal trainer and nutritionist who helped me develop a fitness routine that rivaled men half my age. My wardrobe now consisted of custom-tailored suits that cost more than David spent on his car payments. More importantly, I was happier and more energized than I had been in years. The stress of walking on eggshells around Miranda, of watching my son gradually distance himself from his roots, had lifted completely. My social calendar filled quickly with networking events, charity galas, and exclusive business dinners. The city's elite welcomed me not as David's father, but as a successful entrepreneur and investor in my own right. I found myself dating again for the first time since my wife's death, meeting intelligent, accomplished women who appreciated both my success and my life experience. Margaret, a retired federal judge, and I had been seeing each other regularly, her sharp wit and legal background providing fascinating conversations over wine and dinner. The most satisfying aspect of this new chapter was the complete radio silence from David and Miranda. They had assumed I would come crawling back within weeks, perhaps offering to be more accommodating if they would just let me return. Instead, they got nothing, no desperate phone calls, no pathetic attempts to reconcile, no updates on my living situation. I had vanished from their lives as completely as they had dismissed me from theirs. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that David had expected me to struggle, to maybe find a modest apartment and live quietly on Social Security. The idea that I might not only survive but thrive without them had apparently never crossed their minds. They were about to learn just how wrong they had been. 6 months after my eviction, Meridian Ventures had become a force to be reckoned with in the investment world. My first major acquisition was a struggling but promising AI startup that needed both capital and strategic guidance. Using my decades of experience in corporate restructuring, I helped them pivot their business model, streamline operations, and secure major contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Within 4 months, the company's valuation had tripled, generating headlines in tech journals and establishing my reputation as a savvy investor with an eye for transformative opportunities. The second major play was in real estate development. Having noticed the city's shortage of luxury senior living communities, I partnered with renowned architects and healthcare specialists to develop Grandview Estates, a revolutionary assisted living facility that resembled a 5-star resort more than a nursing home. The 200-unit development featured concierge services, gourmet dining, fitness centers, and even a small casino. Pre-sales exceeded expectations by 300%, with a waiting list that stretched 2 years into the future. The project's success caught the attention of major media outlets, earning me a feature in Forbes as one of the year's most innovative entrepreneurs over 65. My consulting practice had also evolved into something unprecedented. Rather than simply advising individual companies, I had created an exclusive network called the Wisdom Circle, bringing together retired executives, successful entrepreneurs, and industry experts to provide comprehensive strategic guidance to growing businesses. The annual membership fee of $100,000 might have seemed steep, but the results spoke for themselves. Member companies showed an average revenue increase of 40% within their first year. The waiting list for membership had grown to over 200 companies, turning what started as a simple consulting practice into a highly selective, premium service. The cryptocurrency investments continued to pay dividends as well. My early adoption of various digital currencies, combined with strategic trading algorithms developed by a team of former Wall Street quantitative analysts, had grown my initial investment into a portfolio worth over $8 million. I had also begun investing in cryptocurrency mining operations, purchasing stakes in facilities across 3 countries that were generating passive income of approximately $50,000 per month. But perhaps the most satisfying development was the recognition I was receiving in professional circles. I had been invited to speak at 3 major business conferences, served as a guest lecturer at 2 prestigious business schools, and been appointed to the advisory boards of several emerging technology companies. The Harvard Business Review had even asked me to write an article about late-career entrepreneurship based on my remarkable post-retirement success. Every achievement felt like validation not just of my business acumen, but of my worth as a human being, worth that David and Miranda had so callously dismissed. They had thrown away a relationship with someone who was quickly becoming one of the city's most influential business leaders, and they didn't even know it yet. Through my extensive network, gathering intelligence on David's company proved easier than I had anticipated. TechFlow Solutions, his pride and joy, was indeed successful on the surface, but the deeper I dug, the more concerning the picture became. My friend Harrison, a venture capital partner who specialized in tech investments, had been approached to participate in TechFlow's Series B funding round. Over lunch at our exclusive club, he shared insights that confirmed my worst suspicions about David's business practices and strategic decisions. The company's burn rate was astronomical, primarily due to Miranda's influence on spending decisions. She had convinced David that image was everything, leading to expensive office renovations, lavish client entertainment, and a marketing budget that exceeded their research and development investments. Their flagship product, while innovative, was built on technology that would become obsolete within 18 months due to advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Worse yet, their main competitor, Nexus Systems, was preparing to launch a superior product that would likely capture 60% of TechFlow's market share within 2 years. David's management style had also become increasingly problematic. Success had inflated his ego to dangerous proportions, and he had begun dismissing input from his original team members, the very people whose expertise had made the company successful in the first place. 3 key engineers had already left for competitors, taking valuable institutional knowledge with them. Employee morale was declining, and several major clients had begun questioning whether TechFlow could deliver on their long-term promises. The company that had once been built on innovation and collaboration was becoming a one-man show run by someone who confused confidence with competence. The financial projections were equally troubling. Based on current trajectories, TechFlow would need to secure at least $15 million in Series B funding within the next 8 months to maintain operations and fund necessary product development. However, their customer acquisition costs had increased by 180% while their customer lifetime value had decreased by 25%, metrics that would make any serious investor think twice about participating in another funding round. Harrison confided that his firm had already decided to pass on the opportunity, and 2 other major VC groups had reached similar conclusions. Most damaging of all was the personal financial situation David and Miranda had created for themselves. Their lifestyle inflation had far exceeded their actual income, leading to significant personal debt that David was attempting to service through company dividends and salary increases that were weakening TechFlow's cash position. They were living in a $2 million home with a mortgage that consumed 40% of David's take-home pay, driving cars that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and maintaining a social calendar that required thousands of dollars monthly in entertainment and clothing expenses. They were trapped in a golden cage of their own making, dependent on TechFlow's continued success to maintain their lifestyle, but blind to the storm clouds gathering around their business. The irony was perfect. While they had dismissed me as a financial burden, they had become prisoners of their own excessive spending and poor financial planning. The charity gala at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel was one of the city's premier social events, drawing business leaders, philanthropists, and political figures from across the region. I attended not just as a supporter of the Children's Hospital fundraiser, but as one of the evening's major sponsors. Meridian Ventures had donated $250,000, earning me a place at the head table alongside the mayor and several Fortune 500 CEOs. Margaret accompanied me, stunning in an emerald evening gown that perfectly complemented her silver hair and sharp intellect. We were discussing the evening's auction items with the hospital's chief administrator when I spotted familiar faces across the crowded ballroom. David and Miranda had clearly invested heavily in their appearance for this event. His tuxedo was impeccable, her designer gown probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and they moved through the crowd with the practiced confidence of people accustomed to being noticed. They were working the room methodically, David's sales instincts clearly engaged as he pitched TechFlow's capabilities to anyone who would listen. Miranda played her role perfectly, the supportive wife who could discuss technology trends with surprising fluency while steering conversations toward potential business opportunities. What struck me most was how different David looked, not physically, but in his demeanor. The easy confidence of his youth had been replaced by something harder, more calculated. Success had changed him in ways that went beyond the expensive clothes and practiced small talk. He seemed to be performing rather than simply being himself, constantly aware of how others perceived him and adjusting his behavior accordingly. The spontaneous laugh I remembered from his childhood had become a measured response, deployed strategically to build rapport with potential clients or investors. The moment of recognition was inevitable in such a gathering. David spotted me first, his expression cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been embarrassment. He whispered something to Miranda, who turned and fixed me with a stare that could have frozen champagne. They approached slowly, clearly debating their strategy, while Margaret and I continued our conversation about the hospital's new cardiac wing as if nothing unusual was happening. "Dad," David said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." Miranda remained silent, her smile plastic and her eyes calculating as she tried to process this unexpected development. The hospital administrator, sensing tension, excused himself to check on the evening's program. Margaret, with the instincts of someone who had spent decades reading courtroom dynamics, simply raised an eyebrow and waited to see how this family drama would unfold. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. David and Miranda, dressed for success, but clearly uncomfortable, facing a father they had dismissed as irrelevant, but who now appeared more prosperous and confident than they had ever seen him. "You look well, Dad," David continued, his eyes taking in my custom tuxedo, the Patek Philippe watch on my wrist, and Margaret's obvious sophistication. "Are you doing okay?" The question hung in the air, loaded with assumptions about what my life should have looked like after they had cast me aside. Miranda's expression shifted from confusion to calculation as she began to process the implications of my presence at such an exclusive event. The charity gala's minimum table cost was $10,000, and my position at the head table suggested an involvement that went far beyond simply purchasing a ticket. "I'm doing exceptionally well, thank you," I replied, my voice warm but distant. "David, Miranda, I'd like you to meet Margaret Harrison, retired Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. Margaret, this is my son David and his wife Miranda." The introduction served multiple purposes. It established Margaret's impressive credentials, while subtly emphasizing the quality of company I was keeping. Margaret's firm handshake and measured smile conveyed exactly the right message. polite acknowledgement without warmth. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in social chess. David probed carefully about my living situation, my activities, and my apparent prosperity, while I provided answers that were truthful but minimal. Yes, I had found suitable housing. Yes, I was keeping busy. Yes, I had made some good friends. Each response raised more questions than it answered, and I could see the wheels turning in both their minds as they tried to reconcile their assumptions about my circumstances with the evidence before their eyes. Miranda finally broke her silence when the hospital's development director approached our group to thank me personally for Meridian Ventures' extraordinarily generous contribution. The phrase hit David like a physical blow. His face went pale as the implications sank in. After the director moved on, Miranda leaned forward slightly and asked, with barely concealed urgency, "Meridian Ventures? Are you involved with that company?" Her research instincts had clearly been activated. She had probably heard the name in business circles, but never connected it to her dismissed father-in-law. "I founded it," I said simply, watching their expressions change from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. David's mouth opened and closed without sound, while Miranda's carefully maintained composure began to crack. The orchestra had begun playing, signaling the start of dinner service, and I took Margaret's arm to escort her to our table. "Enjoy your evening," I told them, my tone pleasant but final. As we walked away, I could feel their stares boring into my back, and I heard David's voice, strained and urgent, calling, "Dad, wait." But I didn't turn around. Some conversations required preparation, and this wasn't the time or place for the reckoning that was inevitably coming. The week following the charity gala brought a flurry of activity from David and Miranda's direction. Phone calls I didn't answer, emails I didn't respond to, and even a visit to my penthouse building that was politely turned away by the concierge at my instruction. Meanwhile, my investigation into TechFlow's situation had uncovered details that were both alarming and oddly satisfying. Harrison had provided additional intelligence from his venture capital network, painting a picture of a company teetering on the edge of a financial cliff, while its leadership remained blissfully unaware of the approaching disaster. The most damaging revelation came from Sarah Chun, TechFlow's former head of product development and one of David's original co-founders. She had reached out to me through professional channels, having heard about Meridian Ventures' success and knowing of my family connection to David. Over coffee at a discreet downtown cafe, she painted a troubling picture of a company that had lost its way. "David's changed," she told me, her frustration evident. "He used to value everyone's input, but now he only listens to Miranda and a few yes men he's hired. We tried to warn him about market shifts, about competitor threats, but he dismissed our concerns as negativity." The technical details Sarah shared were devastating. TechFlow's core product relied on proprietary algorithms that were becoming increasingly outdated as artificial intelligence advanced. Competitors were developing solutions that would make David's technology obsolete within months, not years as I had initially thought. Worse yet, two major clients were already testing alternative solutions and seemed likely to terminate their contracts when they came up for renewal. The company that David believed was worth $50 million might actually be worth less than $10 million in current market conditions. Sarah's revelations about the company culture were equally concerning. Miranda had become an unofficial decision-maker despite having no official role, often contradicting department heads and changing strategic directions based on what she read in business magazines. Her influence had created a toxic environment where experienced employees felt undervalued and second-guessed. The brain drain was accelerating, with key personnel leaving faster than they could be replaced, taking institutional knowledge and client relationships with them. Perhaps most significantly, Sarah revealed that David had been quietly shopping the company to potential acquirers, hoping to cash out before the competitive landscape shifted too dramatically. However, the preliminary offers had been disappointing, significantly lower than his expectations and contingent on retaining key personnel who were already planning their departures. The golden exit that David and Miranda had been counting on was looking increasingly unlikely, leaving them trapped in a declining business with personal expenses that required continued success to maintain. As I reviewed Sarah's information alongside my own research, a plan began to form. TechFlow needed help. Substantial financial investment, strategic guidance, and operational restructuring that could only come from someone with deep industry experience and significant resources. I had both the capability and the network to save David's company, but the question remained, did I want to? And if so, what would be the price for my intervention? The irony was exquisite. The father they had dismissed as worthless might be the only person capable of preventing their financial ruin. The letter arrived at TechFlow's offices on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier in a manila envelope that bore the elegant letterhead of Meridian Ventures. Inside, David found a formal acquisition proposal that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The terms were straightforward but shocking. Meridian Ventures was prepared to purchase 60% of TechFlow Solutions for $30 million, providing immediate capital injection for operations and growth, strategic restructuring guidance, and access to a network of industry contacts that could transform the company's market position. The proposal included provisions for retaining current management, protecting employee interests, and maintaining the TechFlow brand identity. What made the offer particularly stunning was its timing and precision. Every weakness in TechFlow's position was addressed: the capital shortage, the competitive threats, the operational inefficiencies, and the talent retention challenges. The proposal demonstrated an intimate knowledge of the company's situation that could only have come from extensive research and industry connections. Most importantly, the offer came with a 30-day expiration date and a requirement that David personally attend a meeting to discuss terms. No lawyers, no intermediaries, no Miranda, just father and son. David's initial reaction was a mixture of relief and suspicion. The financial lifeline was exactly what TechFlow needed, but the source was problematic in ways that went beyond simple family dynamics. Accepting help from the father he had dismissed would require acknowledging that his own judgment had been catastrophically wrong. More difficult still would be explaining to Miranda how the elderly man she had convinced him to evict had become wealthy enough to acquire majority control of their company. The pride that had driven him to reject family connections now threatened to prevent him from accepting the assistance he desperately needed. Miranda's response was predictably complex. Her initial instinct was to reject any offer that would give me control over their lives, but her practical nature quickly recognized the impossible bind they were in. TechFlow's Series B funding round had stalled completely, with 3 major venture capital firms declining to participate after conducting due diligence reviews. Their personal financial situation was becoming untenable, with credit card debt mounting and mortgage payments consuming an ever larger percentage of David's salary. The lifestyle they had built required TechFlow's continued success, but that success was no longer assured without outside intervention. The most challenging aspect of the situation was the realization that I had been right about everything: their spending habits, their business vulnerabilities, and their need for experienced guidance. Every concern I had raised during family dinners, every suggestion I had made about financial planning, every warning about rapid expansion had been dismissed as the outdated thinking of someone who didn't understand modern business. Now, faced with the consequences of ignoring that advice, they were confronted with the uncomfortable truth that the man they had rejected as irrelevant possessed exactly the knowledge and resources they needed to survive. The question was whether their pride would allow them to accept help from someone they had treated so poorly, and whether I would demand an accounting for their behavior as part of the price for my assistance. The meeting took place in my penthouse conference room on a cold Thursday evening in December, exactly 1 year after David and Miranda had handed me that eviction notice. David arrived alone, as stipulated, his usual confidence replaced by visible anxiety as he took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the custom furniture, and the panoramic city view that his own apartment couldn't match. The contrast with our last private conversation couldn't have been more stark. Then, he had held all the power, delivering ultimatums from a position of strength. Now, he sat across from me as a supplicant, his company's future hanging in the balance. "I owe you an apology," he began, the words clearly difficult for him to speak. The way I treated you was wrong. I let success go to my head, let Miranda convince me that our old life was holding us back. I should have honored everything you did for me, everything you sacrificed to help me succeed. The apology was genuine. tinged with the desperation of someone who had finally recognized the magnitude of his mistakes. But apologies, while necessary, couldn't undo the damage that had been done to our relationship or erase the months of hurt and rejection I had endured. "I appreciate your words, David," I replied, my voice measured and professional. "But this isn't about forgiveness or family reconciliation. This is a business transaction between Meridian Ventures and TechFlow Solutions. The personal relationship we once had was terminated when you chose to prioritize your wife's opinions over your father's well-being. What I'm offering now is a chance to save your company and your employees' jobs, nothing more." The coldness in my voice was deliberate. I wanted him to understand that trust, once broken so completely, couldn't be easily restored through desperate apologies. The business discussion that followed was thorough and unflinching. I laid out TechFlow's vulnerabilities in detail, explaining how their market position had deteriorated and what would be required to restore competitiveness. The restructuring plan I proposed was comprehensive but harsh: executive salary cuts, operational streamlining, strategic refocusing, and cultural changes that would eliminate Miranda's influence over company decisions. David listened with growing understanding of how precarious his situation had become, his face pale as I detailed competitor threats and market shifts he had failed to recognize. The final terms I presented were fair but non-negotiable. Meridian Ventures would acquire 60% of TechFlow for $30 million, with David retaining 40% ownership and continuing as CEO under a board structure that included myself and 2 other Meridian appointees. A personal services contract would require David to attend quarterly business review meetings and accept strategic guidance on major decisions. Most significantly, Miranda would be prohibited from any involvement in company operations or strategic planning, a condition that would undoubtedly create significant tension in their marriage, but was essential for TechFlow's survival. As David signed the documents, his hand trembling slightly, I felt no satisfaction in his humiliation, only sadness for what our relationship had become. The son I had raised to value integrity and family loyalty had transformed into someone who prioritized status and appearance over the people who loved him most. Money could save his company, but it couldn't restore the trust and respect that had been permanently damaged. "You'll succeed under this arrangement," I told him as he prepared to leave. "Your company will prosper, your employees will be secure, and you'll learn to be a better leader. But understand this. We are business partners now, nothing more. The father-son relationship you chose to discard cannot be purchased back, regardless of how much either of us might want it to be different." He nodded silently and walked away, carrying the signed contracts that would save his professional life while forever changing our personal one. Some prices, once paid, can never be refunded. This story explores themes of family dynamics, the corrupting influence of sudden wealth, and the power of resilience in the face of betrayal. While the protagonist achieves material success and professional vindication, the emotional cost of his son's betrayal creates a permanent rift that money cannot heal. True victory sometimes comes with an unexpected price: the realization that some relationships, once broken, can never be fully repaired.